discuss the various development challenges that India faces today. With this, I would first like to invite ADG Sir Shri Manish Desai ji up on the dais, and I would ask him to please escort our chief guest, Shri NC Saxena, who is the former Secretary of Planning Commission and Rural Development. We welcome you, sir. Professor Bishwajit Das from CCMG Jamia to please come up on the stage. I would request our ADG Shri Manish Desai to please give the inaugural speech for the seminar.
We have a guest who is so accomplished, who has done so much of work and who possesses so much of knowledge on all developmental issues. And when we have an expert like Bishwajit Da, it is incumbent upon, as a representative of Indian Institute of Mass Communication, it's incumbent upon me to extend a very warm and hearty welcome to our luminary guest list who are present on the dais today. Please give them a big hand as we are about to listen to them. Today is an important day for Indian Institute of Mass Communication because today over here I am seeing a kind of sangam. The students from Lady Irwin College, from MCRC, Jamia Millia Islamia are also here to take part in this symposium which has been organized with great earnestness. The job of a good development journalist or a development reporter is to report about the transition, the transformation that is taking place in India. But remember, your job is not going to be that easy. Finding a place in mainstream media for development reports is going to be an uphill task. Because let's just again remember what Mr. P. Sainath said, which I mentioned in the beginning. He had very succinctly said that when Vidarbha was witnessing large-scale farmer suicides, there were a total of 4 reporters on the field reporting about agrarian crisis, what was leading to the farmer suicides. And at the same time, the Lakme India Fashion Week was going on in Mumbai, where 650 media persons had registered. And those are the priorities of media. That again brings it back to the thing that Indian media is politically free, but is imprisoned by profit. But then competitive people who are competent, excel when they are faced with challenges. So I would urge all of you to keep the flame of development journalism burning in you always, because tomorrow, you need to be practical. I'm not saying that, because not all cannot become Sainath, or not all newspapers or magazines may support that kind of a reportage. But you need to be practical, but at the same time, but keep the flame of a development journalist burning in you, because that is, like, for example, like, even today, Rahul Dravid is long retired and gone by, but still he is quoted as a classic example of batsmanship. Like that, development journalism is a test cricket, it's a classic, it's one of the classical journalism, these things. Please never overlook the issues of development journalism. And I'm sure today's symposium, where you will get to hear, to listen to luminaries in this field. We have got sessions on agrarian crisis, rural livelihood, tribal issues, environmental issues, and above all, we have got expert in Mr. MC Saxena, a very senior IAS officer, a retired IAS officer who has been in the forefront in public policy making. He was the secretary of the Planning Commission, and he was associated with the Saxena Committee report on BPL census. I mean, he knows I was just mentioning to him, whatever topics we have covered in the symposium today, he could have spoken with authority on all of them. It's a chance for you to listen to the very learned persons in the field, and I congratulate, on behalf of IIMC management, I congratulate Dr. Surbi Daiya because she's part of us, but still, I congratulate her for taking this initiative in organizing this thing. And it's not for me to go on lecturing because I'm not an expert. I take leave at this point of time, and I pave the way for the experts to speak. Thank you very much. Have a great time in IIMC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. I would now like to invite the chief guest to please address the students.
Of our problems, and Dr. Desai has very well summed up what needs to be done and where we are lacking. As we all know, India has done very well on economic growth for the last 30 years, and we have also done very well on all those programs where contractors are involved, whether it is road building or transmission of electrical lines or even the sanitation program. Wherever you have contractors, somehow our progress seems to be quite well. But we have not done well on programs where bureaucracy has to directly deliver. Whether it is identification of the poor, whether it is quality of education, whether it is health services, whether it is in agriculture. So wherever you find that there are no contractors, we have not done very well. So what are those factors because of which we have not done well and what needs to be done? That would be the sum and substance of my talk. Let's look at this one. We have done very well on economic front, but not all groups have benefited to the same extent. As we all know, inequality has increased. The top 0.1%, their incomes have gone up by more than 12 times, but the bottom 50%, their income has not even doubled. So therefore, inequalities have increased, and one of the main reasons why inequalities have increased is the fact that the services which are provided to the poor are of very poor quality, whether it is education, health, nutrition, etc. That's why the gap between the rich and the poor is increasing. Also, although poverty has declined in India, but the Adivasis, the scheduled tribes, you find that their rate of poverty decline has been much less as compared to even the STs and OBCs. And there are many reasons for that. Displacement, land alienation, they speak a different language, so therefore the education is not very well developed. Poor governance, tribal districts are generally regarded as punishment postings, so IAS officers are not very keen to work there. And of course, Forest Rights Act has not been implemented, and then there is poor governance in these areas. So therefore, tribal districts in India have generally been, have remained backward, and that's one of the challenges that we need to address. Next. Then India has not done very well as compared to other developing countries, and we have been left far behind even Bangladesh or Nepal or Vietnam. Countries which are poorer than India are doing much better on all health indicators or education. Even if you look at fertility rate, then you find that the number of births per woman has declined to 2.1 in Bangladesh, which is a Muslim country, and it is still 2.3 in India. Therefore, even on fertility rate, India's progress has not been as good as it is in other countries. Next. At the same time, if you look at, again the other line is not visible, but earlier in the 1960s, the ratio between the poorest state Bihar and the richest state Maharashtra was 2:1, and now you find the ratio is about 5:1. So inter-state inequality is also increasing in India, which leads to migration, which leads to social tensions, and which leads to all kinds of problems in both for those who migrate and on the local population. One of the reasons why interstate inequality is increasing is because Government of India's devolution of funds, which is, as you know, through the Finance Commission and also through the ministries, that is not very equitable, and more money goes to richer states than poorer states. Recently, you must have read in the papers that the new Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission, has been asked to look at the 2011 population as the basis. So hopefully there will be better fund devolution to states like Bihar or UP or Rajasthan, where unfortunately, because population rise has been faster, they have not been able to get as much money as the states where population has been controlled, like Kerala or Tamil Nadu, etc. So on the whole, we find that even from the ministries, you find that because the poorer states are not able to spend money, therefore the richer states get more money, and this clearly shows. And the result of all this is that if you go to Bihar, Eastern Bihar, then you will find a school like this. There are no building, no furniture, children have to get their own mats, etc. And if you go to the poorest district of Kerala, Mallapuram, you will find a school like this. This is government school of Mallapuram. So in terms of infrastructure, you find there is a great deal of difference between the richer states and the poorer states. Well, friends, as you know, there has been a great deal of debate recently on the unemployment figures, and we have been saying that unemployment has risen to 6.1%, which is the highest in the last 4 to 5 years. In fact, unemployment rate is not the only indicator to judge employment, because if you compare India with other countries in Europe, you find that unemployment rate is as high as 14% in Spain, 10% in Italy, 18% in Greece, 9% in France, and even in Sweden it is 6%. So therefore one should not get too alarmed by the 6.1% unemployment rate. But what is more alarming is the fact that the number of those who are employed has not been increasing at all. In fact, as you can see, if you see the last row, you find that those employed as percentage of 15 to 59 age group, that has been declining. Because in India, there is a group in developed countries, either people are employed or unemployed. But we have another group in India, neither employed nor looking for work. That includes a large number of educated women, that includes a large number of men who are doing PhD or who are doing post-graduation, because they can't find a work, so they are studying. So therefore, this class of people who are neither looking for work nor employed, that is growing, which is not being reflected in the rate of unemployment. So we need to really look at also that figure, which has not been declared. And when we have the National Census Survey figure, we will find that the total number of jobs have not been increasing. In fact, if you look at women's participation in workforce, you find that it is declining because agriculture is getting more mechanized, because in central India, minor forest products are disappearing, and also as incomes increase, husbands don't like their wife to work, and they feel with great pride, my wife doesn't work. So that kind of patriarchal values still continue in our country, and men can go outside on a bicycle to work as maybe as a construction worker or a security guard, but women stay at home. So therefore, rural women's work participation in workforce has been declining. In fact, there are a large number of problems which I sort of read earlier about women's issues. For instance, in Rajasthan, there is a law which says that women are to be equated with lunatics and idiots. Lunatics, idiots and women have been placed in the same category in Rajasthan's Renunciation Act, Section 46. So therefore, there are all kinds of anti-women policies and laws which need to be changed, and I hope you would write about this on these issues also. The reason why we are not doing so well is, first of all, because our economy is a black economy and our tax collection is not very high. As you can see, it's only about 17% as compared to other countries, BRICS countries, where it is in the range of about 30 to 40%. Also, our programs are not very well designed. This is NREGA. NREGA should be spending more money in poorer states like Bihar or UP or Assam, but you find that rural poor expenditure is very high in states where there is less poverty. So therefore, we need to really change the design of these programs. We should say that allocation from Government of India in NREGA would be based on the number of rural poor in that state, because the program is meant for rural poor. But unfortunately, because it's a free-for-all program, richer states are getting more money than the poorer states. Similarly, you find that the other problem is that states are not reporting correct data. And there is a great deal of difference between the reported data and the evaluated data. So therefore, at the lower level, at the sub-district level, there is no accountability. The lower level staff is able to report exaggerated or bogus figures and get away with it. As you can see from this, these are the severely malnourished children who can die any time because they are in grade 3 and grade 4. And there is a lot of difference between what the state governments report and what is being reported, evaluated by UNICEF, or also by the National Family Health Survey. Yes. Similarly, you find that in sanitation, earlier in 2011, when if you look at UP, you find UP was reporting 93%, and 93% houses have already been covered with the toilets in 2011. But when census figures came out, it found that the figure was only 23%. So there is a big difference between what is being reported by the staff and what is being evaluated. I recall some years back I had gone to Maharashtra. Maharashtra was also reporting a lot of bogus data. So I was reviewing the program, so I told the Secretary Sanitation, I said, Bandana, all your figures are bogus. She said, sir, don't call it bogus. This is advanced statistics. This is what we will achieve after 10 years. But we are very fond of this program, so we are reporting it right now. So that is the whole, the reason why our progress is not so good is because of the fact that accountability has not been established. There is a collusion between the lower level staff and the district staff, and all figures which come to the state government, whether it is hunger or nutrition or sanitation, they are not to be believed. Next. Of course, there is a lot of corruption, as you all know, that in all programs there is a great deal of corruption, especially in ICDS, whether it is Maharashtra, Gujarat, UP, because all the supplies are centralized, and it was found out that 2/3 of all money on this program is being leaked out. In fact, when this study came out from the National Human Rights Commission, I sent its copy to the UP government, and then I spoke to the UP secretary. I said, look, Alok, I have sent you this study. What have you done? Why don't you take some action? He said, अरे sir, ये तो Ponti Chadha का मामला है. इसमें हम क्या कर सकते हैं? And then Ponti Chadha is the contractor who is to supply the ready-to-eat food. And then he told me that how ministers at the higher level were making 100 crores every year in this program. So therefore there is this kind of grand corruption in many programs where you have centralized supplies, and this is the result of this program. In fact, a recent study showed that in Hardoi district in UP, People don't call it Paustik Ahar, they call it Pashu Ahar because the children take it and they feed it to their cattle. Now, if you look at sanitation, although government is claiming that 98% households have got toilets, but there is a problem. Problem are that we are concentrating too much on construction and also on usage, but not constructing on safe disposal of the street trash. Next. If you look at this is the toilet of Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, they don't concentrate on construction above the ground construction. They just provide a pit, and there are, as you can, a pan, and then as you can see, there are two pits at the back. Small pits, one pit will get filled up, then the other pit will start getting filled up, and you can remove the excreta from the first pit after 2 years. You can touch it with your hands. Unfortunately, in India, you find that there is no focus in our program on having twin pits. Richer farmers are generally going in for septic tanks, and the poorer farmers are constructing only one single pit, which is also very large. So therefore, this is how college would look like in India. There is a lot of focus on above the ground structure, so that when collector comes to inspect, he can see that toilets have been constructed. But no one likes to see whether the pits are there or not, whether they are twin pits, or that is not the focus of our attention. This is the size of pit, which is very, very large, which is not at all needed. So these technical issues are also being missed out. Then if we look at the urban housing program, as you all know, 30 to 40% people live in conditions like this. But government is concentrating on constructing houses which are to be owned by the urban poor. Urban poor cannot afford to buy a house. For them, there should be a program of rental housing or a program of night shelters. Because imagine a rickshaw puller or a street beggar, how can he ever think of even one-room tenement? He cannot buy, and no bank will give him loan. So therefore, the focus must shift from owner construction to either rental housing or on night shelters. Next. Of course, as we all know, the staff is absent. This is from a study done by Planning Commission, which showed that at the community health centers, the staff are mostly absent. And in states like Rajasthan, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, hardly 20 to 30% doctors are present. In fact, if you draw a circle of 100 kilometers around Lucknow, you'll find that all doctors have their clinics in Lucknow or Kanpur itself, and they go once a week to the primary health center, and they have to bribe a certain amount to the MLA or to the civil surgeon, and they get away with it. So therefore, there is this kind of collusion which is rendering services to the poor totally ineffective. Coming now to the size of government, if you compare India with other countries, we find that we don't have too many government staff. But the skill imbalance is wrong. We have too many clerks, peons, orderlies, cooks who are not needed. And we have very few doctors, teachers, nurses, even policemen. So therefore, there is a great deal of imbalance between the line staff and the staff that is not needed. Next. If you compare India with another country, which is a British colony, Singapore, you find that in Singapore, they reduce the number of class 4 staff and class 3 staff, and class 1 staff and class 2 staff who will do thinking, who will supervise, that was increased substantially. But that did not happen in India. As you can see in the last column, India has just about 3% in class 1, 8% in class 2. And with the result that the supervision which is needed is not being provided. Next. This gives the picture of how where India stands with respect to salaries as well as the number of government staff. On the x-axis we have the number of government staff per 100 population. On the y-axis we have the salaries as a multiple of per capita GDP. And as you can see, India is an outlier. Salaries are very high, and this is the average salary for the salaries of class 3, class 4 servant, that is the average. But the number is very small. I had gone to Vietnam 2-3 months back, and there the teacher salary is about 6,000 rupees, whereas in our country it is about 30,000 rupees. So therefore, high salaries are not leading to correct output in India, because the teachers therefore they are not present, they are not teaching, there is no supervision. Not only the number is very low, but when you look at the interstate comparison, you find that poorer states, the number of government staff is very, very low. Bihar is just about, if you look at the last column, compare Maharashtra with Bihar, you can see that the number of government servants in Bihar is very low, with the result that supervision or many the kind of formats which have to do with the government of India to get more money, those are not there. Now friends, let me sum up. I am writing a book these days on civil service, and my book can be summed up in just about 2 slides, and this is about the first slide. What is the relationship between politicians, IAS and the people? I think it's like an undivided Hindu family, where the politicians are playing the role of rich and powerful husband. Civil servants are literate because they don't have the domain knowledge. They are not liked by the people. So I put them ugly, but one should not call any woman ugly, so I've deleted that. But they are having affairs with the private sector. So they must be good looking, that's why they are having affairs with the private sector. And this is, now let's just do last. This is what is government. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to invite Dr. Biswajit Das for his keynote address.
It's indeed an honor to be here. I would like to thank Saxena sir, Mr. Desai, for a wonderful presentation in the beginning to set the tone up. Before I begin, I would like to say that how many of you actually understood in what way it connects to your subject. I recall when I started development communication in Jamia, in NCRC as a founding member, I initiated development planning as a paper in development communication. I'm afraid whether still it exists or not, I have no idea. Sorry? Okay, wonderful, wonderful, good to know. There are a couple of things. Before I begin, I would like to start with a conceptual note where I would like to talk about when we talk about development journalism or development communication. I request you all to have a look at the EPG Pathshala. Just click in Google EPG Pathshala and go to Communication, Media and Communication Studies and download papers. There are 40 modules on development communication. And in that you will see the last couple of papers are on from philanthropy to tyranny, development communication from philanthropy to tyranny, and the last one probably will be from development to governance. These are the both broad paradigm shifts. Now when we talk about development communication journalism, we need to understand that what are we talking about. Now when we talk about development journalism, probably we start with another genre of journalism, You know that your development, your communications or media or journalism per se probably has undergone a remarkable trajectories. But unfortunately, development has never been faced a primary location within the newspaper itself. So probably that is where you were sort of insisting upon having more developmental experience, exposure, or even getting a sight within the larger space of the newspaper column. But the question arises, do you receive it? Do you receive it? Even though we are constantly doing advocacy with the press to have more and more developmental experiences, whether it is of formal agencies or informal agencies, to locate within the newspaper space, in spite of that you never receive at all. Now, what is the alternative? What is the alternative one can do? What one can do? I would like to also reflect upon my own experience starting a community newspaper back in 1884 till 3 years I did. It's called Our Village, by monthly newspaper experiments which I did. This is also vis-a-vis that you know that there is a larger mainstream newspaper. At the same time, you can create an alternative space for community newspaper. It's called Our Village. I began in Kalahandi. I did a lot of work in Kalahandi as a part of the student movements where back in the campus in JNU. So a couple of people went into Kalahandi, sort of did a lot of work and also did a lot of reportings on famine. So I would like to talk about famine. So when we talk about issues, thematics, I would like to come back to famine as a subject. Famine as a subject, how it is being reported, what are the problems. In that context, I would like to make humble submission by saying, peace IMAP doesn't interest me, everyone loves a drought. It doesn't interest me. I would like to submit by saying, some people love drought, not everyone. Probably this is a time some of you should come up and write a book challenging the very structure of what peace IMAP did. I also revisited what peace IMAP did. In fact, I remember when I came back to Delhi and I was asked to revisit Kalahandi because that was in the front line. Sonia Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi went to Kalahandi, we went and stayed in Panas Punji's house. There are interesting stories you can go back and read. And she was calmed by Panas Punji, and this is where the newspaper reporting, this is where I wanted to demystify the news reporting. This is where I wanted to demystify the news reporting and how they do. In fact, in such disaster, when they go to report, it is nothing else beyond disaster tourism. So this is where I would like to submit my presentation. In the first stage, I will talk about in what way that how we understand development in a present-day world. Now, when we talk about development, it reminds me as one of the measure in 1968 in US Army said, we have to destroy the village in order to save it. We have to destroy the village in order to save it. So village as an epicenter of development, much has flown through. A lot of technical malfunctions, technicalities, the bureaucratic judgments, a lot of things have happened, but still then nothing could be wiped out. It also reminds me a very interesting conversation when Frank Libet Brain, who was the former commissioner of Gurgaon district, I'm sure all of you know that Gurgaon district extended up to Peshawar, and he was the commissioner. He in fact wrote a book called The Idea of India, What I'm trying to submit by saying, an Indophile coming back in England under the patron of Lady Irwin, starting an Indian Village Welfare Association. They were so scared about what is happening in the rural life in the countryside in India. The villages must be protected from the cleverness of the urban ones. So that is where, so the starting in Peshawar, and that raised a lot of controversies. In Peshawar itself. The moment they saw the antenna right upstairs in their house, they were scared about is it a kind of a surveillance? However, this is where the ham radio which was installed in Peshawar and started at the first time a radio initiated. I'm sure all of you, those who talk about community radio today, you need to revisit and understand what kind of community are we talking about. In today's world, when we talk about community radio, we are actually talking about a transnational understanding about communities. India lived in communities. India had its own communities. But suddenly we find the 90s reinventing the idea of community itself. Probably we are trying to impose certain ideas. In 50s, the same thing happened. Like community development program came to India. It's an interesting that in 50s certain experiments in certain parts like in UP, in Hyderabad, in Sameerpet, in Rankhandi, in UP, started the community development program so that we want to initiate more about community consciousness. Imagine that India needs to be trained and taught about community, how to live in a community. Probably our sense of understanding about community is not probably clear. We live in a society where our societies have been understood as a homogenized communities. That is again a myth. That is again a myth by certain sociologists, functional sociology, which sort of try to always build in terms of building across Latin America and other parts of the world, how do we understand communities? Probably we misplace by understanding that our communities are inegalitarian, there is a power structure, there is a hierarchy, and that probably we have completely misled. And now when we talk about there is a uniformity, homogeneity in community, that probably failed in implementing any of our developmental communication programs in India. In fact, I have extensively written about different research which has gone in, whether it is in an agriculture, family planning, or health, in any sector for that matter, ever since 50s. You see that in India, development communication became the key epitaph for Indian communication research. Anybody who would like to do research has to go to development communication and understand. But the question is, over a period of time, how do we understand development? In fact, development, like any other isms, it has become developmentalism. It has become a developmentalism like colonialism, capitalism. It has become any other isms. So it has just to be mentioned. We do not know, we talk about so many institutions, mega institutions. Think about 70 years, 50 years of developmental projects in this country. Have we ever analyzed in what way developmental planning and these projects, in what way they have made interventions in communities? I know Saxena sir rightly pointed out, get interesting figures. These were also the tasks which I did in late 90s about structural adjustments. You find UNICEF comes with certain programs, we jump into it. Then UNDP comes with another set of programs. UNFPA comes. We need to analyze different kinds of agencies and their levels of interventions. Does it really intervene anywhere? Interestingly, so this is what I wanted to say. And now we live in a time when the comfort of development has been completely wiped out. We live in a neoliberal state. Development was probably coined and conceptualized in a welfare economy. We live in a time where the development of infrastructures, institutions which developed as a service, that was when we talked about public good. Now gradually state is withdrawing, and more institutional spaces are shrinking. More and more we are moving towards technology, and that is where probably we talk about that more we are sort of intervening in terms of what we call digitizing development, more and more technology centered. Well, so you need to understand the shifts in the paradigm itself when you talk about development. That is what I see that the major shift. So that is where, when we began with the idea of development as a philanthropy, now we move towards a tyranny, so nothing happens. Like any other developmental projects are running, we are reporting, nothing else. Beyond that, nothing is happening. There is literally a deadlock in terms of understanding the developmental discourse. So this is where I'm saying the neoliberal, we live in a neoliberal era that provides enormous opportunities and possibilities. And that is where I'm talking about everyone is a stakeholder. State is no more the monopoly. What we started with. Today we find every agents are competing for making and managing development. Now I will give you two instances of I will come back to my reflections on my experiences. One is forest governance. I am immensely indebted to Saxena Saab, whose data I have used extensively when I was working on forest governance. This is again a biosphere and Simlipal biosphere I did. And that is the context I was using. How much a journalist, how much as a reporter, you are aware about what is happening, the level of discourse on forest itself. What is your source? You go back to the library and there are very limited sources. What were the mainstream arguments? You just follow it up and you write. I remember when I was sort of trying to make a coverage of, let's say, 30 years down the line, how forest comes to us in a public space, in a public domain. How do we know about forest? Except in an urban place like this, you go through the postcards or letters or photographs, or even a films, or even a teleserials, that's what? Mediation. Forest is always mediated to you. Now when you go through the newspaper and sort of try to read out forest, you need to see over 30 years Are there changes in reporters itself? The trends in reporting. I found that there is not much substance. All the journalists are not aware the way the larger discourse on forests are changing. Ever since the Rio, you find summit, a lot of changes have occurred in the forest. How much we know about forest? When I follow the arguments, I find there are definite shifts in terms of understanding forest is no more the monopoly of the forester, that is the conservator of the forest. Interestingly, it's a very conservationist argument. I'm not interested in the conservationist argument, nor I would like to see forest as the monopoly of the conservator. Now we have moved much beyond biodiversity. So moved from conservation to biodiversity. And then subsequently we talk about sustainability. Do I see in the report as itself the shift? Do I see that in the report as itself? I do not find much difference. I find still forest has been caught in a manner that how, as a conservationist argument, this is where I'm saying that is what is missing in the report itself. Now, the last experience to my starting a newspaper, which I was talking about, I would like to submit by saying that when I landed up from Delhi in Kalahandi with a couple of friends of mine, we wanted to do some activities. We're not sure what we want to do. We saw a lot of, this is a place where toddy, that mahul trees are there, people make drinks and drink and sleep, and there are a lot of forest produce which has been sold, and this is where we wanted to, and the males drinking a lot. So this is where we wanted to make protests, some kinds of protests. So we started protest, thanks to one of the civil servant from Delhi School of Economics, who was there, so who supported us immensely. So, it went on successfully. That was also the time when famine came in Kalahandi. I ran it for 3 years. And I will tell you the intricacies of running a newspaper and why we wanted to run a newspaper, fueled by the idea of developmental journalism in the Second Press Commission reports and others. We were geared towards making a newspaper. I didn't know anything about newspaper. I don't think you need to know. We started a newspaper. I lived every moment of initiation, introduction and everything. And we wanted to break away from the monopoly of conventional forms of journalism or the newspaper, which is a circulation-based newspaper. We wanted to break away. We know that if you look at in terms of the paradigm, the production process, like whether it's a film production or newspaper productions, there is not much difference. We wanted to break away. We wanted to make it a community-based newspaper. Community not only owns it, consumes it. Not only they own it, they consume it as well. So that was the idea. We were taking collections from them. And it is their story, their community story, which we are selling to them. That was the idea we wanted to bring. But it's not that easy. You think that you go and land up and do a newspaper. You find that there are so many hindrances you have to encounter in the process of reporting. But what you have to report? You report about land ceiling, you report about land alienation, you report about health. Now when you start reporting about land alienation and land ceiling, consolidation, you land up in trouble. There are local power brokers, you will constantly encounter conflicts with this newspaper, with this vested interest groups. These are interest groups. Now, whether it is a local tahsildar, whether it is a BDO, whether it is a contractor, you are continuously negotiating and engaging with them in the tussles. It's not that easy. However, we sort of try to manage and sustain a newspaper. In fact, I remember I started the newspaper not to create an alternative newspaper. I wanted to start as an alternative experiment in Kalahandi. It's called How in Spite of Low Readership and low reading habits, and newspapers can be used through the multiplier effects, to reach out to a larger congregations in the village. And this is where you find that school becomes a space where in the beginning of the prayer, a newspaper is being read out, and students coming from different villages, from different parts of the district, they come for attending the school and they take it further. And we did a controlled experiment and we found what actually news, how it travels, how the news travels to the larger domain, or even a controlled atmosphere, how the information travels. And that is what we were sort of trying to do studies in that. Now in the process, we also realized while running and managing newspaper, it's not that easy. However, we realized that we also need to introduce some interesting themes in the newspaper, and that is where we sort of try to add creativity. We found in the local area that there's a tremendous interest to write poetry, literature, stories, and this is what we're sort of trying to bring out. So what I'm saying is that we sustained it for 3-4 years. I'm sort of trying to say that there are possibilities that you can create such alternative spaces and where you can commute. But what happened? In the process of my engagement, I met a couple of people who were equally activists and sort of trying to do work, but they had probably a political agenda which we never thought about. But I believe such kind of local experiences, such kind of local engagements are not much being brought out in the what we call in the mainstream. The issue is that how do we bring out in the mainstream? We sort of try to forge a larger collective. Where all the experiences of activists or people, those who are working in the grassroots, they came together, they shared their stories and experiences, even how a person is being hounded by the police, by certain miscreants, and this is where you need to highlight so that something should not happen in a way that you were caught behind the police station and you remained 4 years together behind the bar. So I'm saying there are different possibilities that we did. That was in early 90s, and that actually strengthened my understanding about this whole idea that it's not only we look at reporting, we should not take development as a very naive category. We should not take development as a naive category. In fact, we have reached a time where actually we are talking more about governance. Now the issue is that then we need to address the question that how do we understand and engage with the idea of development. We have left behind what we call unilinear perspectives of development, and we talked about technology and data. Now what I'm trying to say that these data, now I remember when Kalahandi famine started, immediately if you read most of the newspapers, it talked about another Ethiopia, another Somalia, root-eating tribals, child selling. These are the kind of metaphors which are being used. Now, when I wanted to revisit, because CSTS initiated me to go back to Kalahandi because I was branded as a Kalahandi man, so I had to revisit Kalahandi and stayed there for a couple of days to work. I realized that the way the reporting takes place in the mainstream newspaper, that needs to be demystified. Because where from this metaphor and similes we got it from the library. If there is just immediately pick up from your resources and put it like another. It's in one way good. It reminds me of Amrita Sen's Hunger and Public Action. Where Amrita Sen talks about that why thousands of people jumped to the river Huanghe in China and people died, but in India it is not possible. It's about public action. Media probably sort of tries to make that public action, tries to highlight the issue, but it does not go beyond. But if you look at the gory picture, the kind of ghastly experience, the way its imageries which the media builds, probably you need to demystify and deconstruct these ideas. Now when I revisited and I understood that most of these terms are actually kind of a debunking. In fact, the question is how much a journalist knows today that how do you understand famine. Most of the debates and discussions about droughts and famines are based on the Hunter's report, which came out during colonial period, where it sort of tried to use a kind of famous population theorist Malthus, his arguments. And still we retain those arguments by our journalists and we continue with that. We do not understand what has changed. Like Malthusian argument which says that starvation leading to death and lack of food. These are the two things which Malthus talks about, that how hunger has been highlighted, the famine. But if you counter this argument, you find that Amrita Sen's Bengal famine is an interesting example to say, even though there are food, still then there is famine. In fact, it reminds me what Mahmoud Mamdani writes, that interestingly, in Africa, there were two boys. One is a fat boy, one is a thin boy. They were walking down on the street and suddenly they came to know that the hunger relief officials are coming. So the fat boy told to the thin boy, go and wear a shirt. What the people will think about you? The thin boy told to the fat boy, they can know the cause of famine. By seeing us, they can know the cause of famine. Why you are fat and why I'm thin. So that's how the control over the resources of the food itself. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to demystify, understand, we need to enhance our understanding about the subjects, what we are sort of trying to do. Now when Amrita Sen talks about that even though there is food, still there is famine, it means we need to demystify Malthusian idea, which still subsequently you find in Indian media itself, reporting itself takes place. Now that is what I would like to do. Thank you.